Good morning, East Ohio. So I bring you greetings from the North Texas Annual Conference. It's a joy to be with you as I spoke to our own annual conference at the conclusion of our time together last Tuesday afternoon. I told them I would be coming to be with you these 3 days, and so they wanted me to bring greetings from them to you. And so I do so. I want to share with you that last November, when we had the extended cabinet summit in Jacksonville, Florida, they paired annual conferences together because of some likenesses and some other reasons that really I have to tell you I didn't understand. But there are a lot of things that happen in life in the church I simply don't understand. I want you to know that. But when I discovered that we were paired with East Ohio, I thought to myself, well, the reason that the North Texas Conference was paired with the East Ohio Annual Conference for a conversation is because, maybe unknown to the planners of this event, but known to Bishop Malone and me, is that we are very good friends and we would just enjoy being together. And I've discovered when you have good relationships with other persons that really the work happens so much better, doesn't it? Amen. And so as your bishop has shared, we've been friends for now some period of time and collaborated on many significant pieces, we believe, either on General Board of Church and Society or General Conference. So Bishop Malone, thank you for the invitation to come and be with you. And I feel right at home. The hospitality's been great. The emerging friendships have been wonderful. And the temperature's just like it is in Dallas, Texas. I mean, I'm just dripping wet all the time. It's just like home. So it's good to be here. Will you pray with me? Oh Lord, in the silence of this moment, prepare our hearts and our minds to hear your word for us this day. Work your will in our lives. Amen. So aware of your theme, what I want to share with you as I begin this morning is to talk about what I'm going to be doing each of the next 3 mornings. Since we're talking about bearing fruit and about all things related to that, I thought it was important for us to till a little soil this morning. I think that tomorrow we're going to talk about how we stay committed to purpose by having the mind of Jesus. And lastly, on Thursday, I'm going to talk about we are one, or we are connected. Now, a number of years ago, I was at an Alban event in a place north of the Dallas-Fort Worth area at a retreat center of the Episcopal Church. This must have been 25 years ago, or maybe a little bit less than that. I can't remember exactly. I'm going to do something this morning I have never done publicly since I was in the 1st grade in a talent show. So you may not laugh after I finish this. You will hurt my feelings. But I remember being at this experience, and we were, it was a continuing education event, and it was an interesting, unique time in my own life for a variety of personal reasons and vocational reasons, and I think I was living with a sense of anxiety that really was not helpful to my own spirit. And the person who was leading this workshop gave us a little piece that he did in his own life about how to stay centered. And the words are like this: calm and changeless, deep mystery, ever more rooted deeply in thee. Except that it has a tune, which I'm going to botch now. But you're going to get to sing it with me in a little bit. Calm and changeless, deep mystery, ever more deeply rooted in thee. Calm and changeless, deep mystery, ever more rooted deeply in thee. Calm and changeless, deep mystery, ever more rooted deeply in thee. Now, what people don't know is that I sing that often in my head. Sometimes I sing it when I'm taking a shower. Often I sing it in the car when I'm thinking about something. But I find myself playing that little mantra over in my soul several times every day. It's become somewhat of a spiritual practice, and it may not mean anything to you, but it means everything to me. And I've discovered in my own time of either uncertainty or anxiety that I need to be reminded that I'm not the center of my own worries. I'm not even the star of my own movie. But I have to remind myself that I'm still deeply seeking to be deeply rooted and grounded in the love of Jesus Christ. Our family, my wife and I, have a relationship with our landscapers. They've actually moved from us from house to house. One of the advantages about being assigned to the Dallas area from the Central Texas Conference, which is in the Fort Worth area, is that we could keep the same landscapers. Now, you may think that is a very little thing. I want to tell you, with my wife, it is a very big thing. Because they speak the same language, they understand each other, they know what they're doing. And so last summer, I was out in the yard, at the front yard, looking at some things, and I said, Arnolfo, the roses are dying. He said, I can see that, Mr. McKee. Well, thank you very much, Arnolfo. I thought to myself, I said, Arnolfo, what is wrong with the roses? We just planted them a year ago. He said, I've got bad news. He said, there's a virus or something in the soil, and that's what's killing them. I said, well, let's take them up and replant roses. And he said, we can't do that. I said, why can't we do that? He said, because if you want roses to grow there, we're going to have to take out all of the soil in this big flower bed and replace it all. It only kills roses. So we will never be able to grow roses in that place. But I'm reminded how it is in our own lives that frequently that the preparation of the soil and the health of the soil becomes very important, not only to plant life, but in terms of the Christian life. When you begin to think about how it is that we focus and we live our lives in the church and everything, sometimes when things are getting off track, you begin to ask the question, in what am I rooted and or grounded? I ask this question of churches frequently, and the reason I ask the question of churches is because when I begin to hear their story about their dreams or what they desire, I'm thinking to myself, we're talking about self-preservation here. And frankly, the goal of the Christian life is not self-preservation, but self-sacrifice.
Yes. Hallelujah.
And the reason I say that is because if you begin to think about it, what it means to be a follower of Jesus, it's not to elevate oneself, but it's to glorify our God.
Amen.
And so always I'm beginning to think in those difficult challenges in my own personal life or other people's lives, is the anxiety we have because where we are placing our roots or where we're not placing our roots begins to thwart our involvement in the reign of this Christ. We look for quick fixes. We look for very quick fixes. We look at quick fixes because those are the things we understand best and because that's the way we lead our lives. But we have to admit, in terms of the ongoing work of our God, we can no longer do that in the United Methodist Church. All of us look for the next big idea. I'm here to tell you this morning, let you in on a secret. There are none. The big idea is really what it means to be rooted and grounded in this love of Christ. That is the most important thing we could take away from this morning. Every one of us brings history to the task of ministry. And when I say the task of ministry, already perhaps some laypersons are checking out. What I want to say to you is you too have ministry. And so all of us bring some history about what was, rather than what God is leading us to. What was rather than what God is leading us to do. And so we want to recreate that. And we forget the essential truth in the last book of the Bible that God wants to create all things new, and that means the church. Amen. So hear this foundation. You may be strengthened in your inner being with the power through His Spirit, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, as you are being rooted and grounded in love. Foundationally, it's important for us to understand that simple truth. Paul knew what he was talking about. He was writing to the Ephesians about how it is that really one's own Christian life, our own ministry, needs to be rooted and grounded in that love of Christ. Fundamentally, we do understand that. Recently, I've been rereading a book that I read about 15, 16, 17 years ago. It's called The Cathedral Within. It's written by William Shores. William Shores was the founder of Share Our Strength, which is a significant hunger ministry across the country. And what he did is he used the metaphor of the building of the cathedral in the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century on the continent of Europe. The metaphor is used to begin to describe how nonprofits can flourish. He examines 5 or 6 of them. He would have other nonprofits today he would talk about, but what I want to say is that what he captures in some of the metaphors related to the building of cathedrals during the 500 years of that time in Europe really has something to say to us about what it means to be leaders in the church. So here are a few ideas I'd say to us. And I think it's about how we finally began to root and ground our ministries in Christ. He said that the building of a cathedral, the building of an inner life, let's say, or the building of a church, and I'm not talking about the actual building of a church. They can happen much faster today than they did, 1,000 years ago, really is a lifetime commitment. So that when they began to build a cathedral, they knew that this was going to be the work of my life. Not until I retire, of my life. And they knew that they had an outcome in mind, a design in mind, a desired outcome, and they knew that it would never be finished in their lifetime. They were in it for the long haul, which meant centuries after their own deaths. If you were to go to Notre Dame in Paris today, you'd begin to discover how long it took them to build that magnificent place of worship. And there are times we think that all of them are dead in Europe, but I want to tell you, I've been at Notre Dame at 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, and it is literally filled with worshipers. But they had this desired outcome, and they knew that it was for the long haul, and they knew that it would never be finished in their lifetime, and they knew that it was the endeavor of a community. I begin to think of my ministry like this, as over a 40 or 45-year period, what it is I will accomplish. And what I realize is I will never know that. And I had to get comfortable about that. And the way I got comfortable about it is to begin to think to myself, calm and changeless, deep mystery, evermore rooted deeply in thee. That it wasn't about me. Now, one of the good things about being elected to bishop out of the Central Texas Conference and moving to the North Texas Conference, it means I moved 25 miles. The reason I was elected and assigned to Dallas is it saved the church a lot of money. So I say to myself, and one of the funnier moments is that I'm a very good steward of your apportionment dollars at work. That being said is that the person who followed me as the pastor there also worked with me for 13 years in that church and had never served as a pastor of a church and only was an ordained elder after he was appointed as the pastor of that church. Worships 1,200 people on Sunday morning. And I have to admit, after pouring 15 years into the place, which is the longest place I've ever been in ministry, I really wanted to keep up. And only because the person who's there, we work together so closely and we're such very, very good friends who kept me from doing a lot of dumb things in ministry. Every once in a while, Philip calls and just sort of tells me what's happening. It's always for the long haul, and what's happened since I left, I have to think it was because of the foundation the congregation began to lay, and God had a desired outcome in mind, at least for a time. It's one of those welcoming, committed mission places I know. And one day, a man sort of stumbled into the church, and we discovered he was a Presbyterian pastor from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and he had to escape the Congo for fear of his own life. He was seeking asylum, and he just happened to walk in the door. His seeking was the church's gain. As we began to visit with him and hear his story, and other people in the congregation took a very dear interest in him, we discovered he had a family still in the DRC who wanted to get out, and he wanted them out. Through the work of significant people in the congregation in terms of their connections with people who can do such things, they were able to bring the whole family and get asylum. It happened because of these lay people who are deeply committed to mission, and the neighbor who surrounds them, they begin to live out what it means to be rooted and grounded in the love of Christ. And so Joseph Kazadi's family comes, and at that time, then I leave. I really had nothing to do with anything other than just permission giving. And so the family comes, and then my successor told me a year later after I'd left, he said, you know, we have about 60 to 70 people from the Democratic Republic of Congo who have moved into the mid-cities between Dallas and Fort Worth. And what I want to say to you, Mike, is they worship at 11 o'clock in our traditional service. Joseph is their pastor, but we decided not to create a separate congregation or a separate service just for our neighbors and our friends from the DRC. We decided that we would translate everything into French. So they bought everyone headphones because somebody who is rooted and grounded in the love of Christ bought them. And then they discovered how many people spoke very good French in the congregation. And then some people from the DRC, they began to join the choir. And what happened is even in this very traditional service, the character and the flavor began to change. So it's truly a blended service. Now, I need to tell you, it's made some people uncomfortable. But God's been working on making those people uncomfortable for a long time in that congregation. I woke up every day sometime and, dear Lord, help me make so-and-so and so-and-so uncomfortable again today. And what I want to tell you is sometimes if people are getting uncomfortable in a congregation, it means the Spirit's moving. Because what happens is we get stuck and we want to talk about the way the church was in 1965. And God doesn't care about that. Anyway, so there's this unique spirit in which 60 to 75 people every Sunday are in that congregation worshiping, and it's just sort of broken down some walls, and even some of the people who are uncomfortable are now, shall I say, sanctified. All of my work for 15 years did not make that happen. And a lot of the work that you do as a layperson or clergy person, unless you just have that kind of experience, you'll never see it happen either. But it's about being rooted and grounded in this love of Christ and keeping your eyes looking forward. There is no instant gratification in being a follower of Jesus. There's only the knowledge that you're living into the true thing. The second thing about the building of cathedrals is that it talks about how we really not only build on the foundations of others, but that we begin to share our strengths with each other. See, rooted and grounded in the love of Christ doesn't mean I have all the answers. I have discovered, even as a bishop, that I know less today than I did 5 years ago. So when they built cathedrals, it was not only for the artisans in the community and the skilled laborers, it was for everyone. It was a community endeavor. And so in the church, in order for us to bear fruit, is we have to understand this is not left to just a few, this is left to all of us. I'm going to talk about those gifts later on this week, but what I do want to say is this is for everyone. And it means you sometimes have to listen to people you normally wouldn't listen to. It also means that the church can be much more inclusive than you could ever dream about. So when the first year I was in North Texas, there was a church that was having a little difficulty, let me say that. It had been one of the largest churches in the North Texas Annual Conference back in the 60s, 70s, early 80s. They would worship 800 or 900 people. It was down to about 120. They'd run down $3 million in endowment doing the same thing they did in 1965. They thought that they had enough money and that they could do it even better, do what they once did, and do it even better, that the result would be different. They did run through a lot of money. The result was the same. So I was deeply troubled by this. They even had a vote at one time about whether to close the church. They had an offer for the building, which would have been significant amount of money. And as they began to transition to their next pastor, one was retiring. They had a young associate there who's very bright. And I said, I just can't see us doing this. I've discovered that I frequently advance an idea to invite conversation, and I do it in such a way that people really talk back to me. I outlawed these words in the first year in North Texas with the cabinet. You're the bishop, whatever you say. Whatever you think. I said, I know what I think. I want some other thinking going on around me. And so But I was having this conversation. I'm thinking, okay, I knew how much money was left in that church in terms of the endowment. I could see them spending it on down and having this building on our hands and wondering what we're going to do. And everybody said, let's just try it. Let's just try it. And so I said, okay. And I can remember telling the pastor, and he spoke at the Council of Bishops meeting. You may remember Bishop Malone when we were there. And I have to tell you, I never thought anything would happen. You got to remember, I was thinking of 1975. But I decided to trust this young pastor who was willing to give it a go. And this last winter, I was in church there, and the place was younger than it had been in 30 years. I'm talking about the number of people in the congregation, the age of. They saw more children they'd seen in a long time. The worship was very, very good. The sermon was good. They invited partners in the neighborhood to be in their building. And I can remember one of the first pieces of unhappiness in the North Texas Conference were some neighbors of this church because they'd started a community garden. And then they had these networking spaces. And what they've done is they've just opened their building to everybody they can in the community as long as it aligns with their values. And as people began to walk through the building again, and they created these networking spaces, this community garden, and they ramped up what they were doing with children, then this congregation is flourishing and has come to life. And in fact, last Sunday, they voted to take on a closed congregation in order to do another significant ministry. So I went to church, and I'd known what was happening, and I finally, pastor's walking him around, and I put my arm around him, and I said, Mitchell, I want to tell you that I was wrong, and I made a mistake. And he looked at me, and he put his arm around me, he said, Bishop, don't worry. I didn't sleep for a year and a half. But what I'm saying is that we have to just understand that the way in which, it's not the way we do church, but the way we are the church, moving the community, is so different than it was 20 years ago. And we have to be open. We have to be open to people who really are deeply rooted in the faith, and they begin to see things differently than some of the rest of us may see them. And you know why? Because it begins to draw people into a deeper faith. It helps communities know that, they just don't exist to sit there on that corner, on that beautiful piece of property, or to be there and for everybody to drive in from all over town and that nobody in this community ever walks in the door. They know that somehow, you know something? Those Methodists actually care about us. They actually love us. We might need to try them out. When we live out who we truly are, God does unbelievable things. The last thing I want to say about this cathedral building is the cathedrals are built in order to tell stories. So if you walk into one of those old cathedrals, they were designed to tell the story by looking around. You'd look at the windows and you begin to imagine what they said. People might tell you, but it would tell the story of the faith or some other unique understandings. You would look at all of the other artwork, significant artwork, carved or painted, frescoes, and people who couldn't read knew the story of the faith. In order for us to, I think, to be deeply rooted and grounded in the faith is we have to continue to tell the stories. And it's not just the story as we find it in the gospel. Don't hear me say that, don't tell them, tell them. But you need to tell your own story, your congregation's story. Because I think as you begin to repeat and tell your own story over and over and over again, about how God is moving either in your life or the life of your congregation in significant ways, then you begin to realize deep within you, not only the indwelling of the Spirit, but this fluttering of the soul or the heart. And you realize when you read the parable of the prodigal son or the woman seeking the lost coin, or the parable of the sheep and goats at the end time, that those aren't just stories told 200 years ago, but they're echoed over and over and over again by living stories. Stories that affirm. Real life stories that affirm the truth of the gospel. And so, in closing, I read these last words that were read just a few moments ago. Now to him who by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. Amen. Amen.